even at the most microscopic level, we see amazing stuff happen. We see the formation of a sun, the formation of a solar system, and ultimately the formation of life. So, of course, they took everything back. And when you look at the creation story of us versus the creation story of the ancient Egyptians, you can see the Big Bang in the Egyptian creation story is basically Ptah, the creator god, speaking into existence, or creating the Agdod and speaking into existence Atum and everything like that. It's the Big Bang. You kind of parallel it with the waters far as the waters of Noon against the space, because that's basically what it's talking about, space. So you had this stuff happen at the smallest level. So the ancient Egyptians really begin there at the smallest level and start looking at things on a microscopic scale. And they basically telling you that by giving you the creation story. I mean, they knew from studying the creation story about eventually they would get into math and the Fibonacci sequence and, the golden ratio. If you starting to study things on a microscopic scale, this is what you will find as you start to zoom out. And of course, they ran into all this stuff. And this is all unbelievably, this is huge knowledge. And they put this stuff to work, as we can see, with the building of pyramids and temples and stuff like that. But this is a huge thing that they begin to understand and put into use. So when you look at the beginning and how these small particles will eventually give life and create the cyanobacteria that will bring about animals and everything like that. When you look at the creation of even us, we know everything is made up of atoms, and atoms are also ultra microscopic. But the key to both of these things, becoming something more, is of course the sun. So now we know that it was the sun that gave cyanobacteria its life. And we could say that the sun, or the energy from the sun, is basically the soul of cyanobacteria. But you can see that when you start studying the progress of the ancient Egyptians and start looking at the text, the pyramid text and all of the Metu, and you can see that they dealt with the question of, did our soul come from the sun? Is our energy, our soul, like some sort of, energetic, conscious, energy, of the sun, basically devoid of matter? So is our soul, the energy of the sun, devoid of matter? Is it the same kind of energy? And they flirted with this. And the whole thing is, energy has to be infinite. It has to be seen and unseen. It has to be, because when you look at existence, and as I said, existence has always existed. There has always been something. Nothing is still something. So, existence is infinite. What the problem we run into, is consciousness. That's the whole thing. It's all about consciousness. Eventually, at one point, consciousness became aware of itself, and consciousness becoming aware of itself, made that first move, as they show you in the formation of the tree of life, the flower of life pattern. It made that first move. Now understand, making that first move took energy. So energy had to have always been there, just like, existence has always been here. So the ancient Egyptians looked at it, well, energy must have always been here along with existence. The thing was, consciousness wasn't aware of itself, and it wasn't aware of the energy. And when it became aware of itself and became aware of energy, it made the first move. It made its first move, and then the next move after that took energy, and so on and so forth. And everything that came into existence after that requires energy. There's no way around that. It's inescapable. Everything requires energy. So energy must have always been, just like existence. So we can say that the universe is infinite and that energy is infinite as well. And nothing can come into existence without energy. It can't happen. So when we look at the quantum physics, we look at the ultra small in quantum physics. And if we go to, string theory, strings to quarks, to protons and neutrons, to eventually atoms, this is a steady flow of energy that we get to reach the atom. And, when you look at the ancient Egyptian creation story, they called it the water waves of noon, and everything came into existence from that. So we're talking about the steady flow, the wave of atoms, steady flow of energy leading to the creation of the atom or atum. And, the ancient Egyptian creation story. So we know in the story you had Shu and Tefnut and Geb and Nut. And remember in the story you had that Shu and Tefnut got lost, and Atum sent the eye out and brought them back. They came back with the eye of Atum, or the eye of Ra, and he brought them back, and he was so happy that he wept, and it was the tears, the water, that brought about, life on earth. And this is basically, the same thing when we look at the creation story of us, how life came out of the waters, the primordial soup, or whatever you want to call it. And, it's the same thing. You can bounce it off back and forth, and it's trying to tell you something in this story. And there's a lot more to it when you look, deeply into it. But they understood. And to me, the fact that they understood this so long ago, which obviously the scientists and researchers of today, way back then, look back and could see what the Egyptians was talking about, and understood that, this is how life came into existence. And when they did their research, all they had to do was match it up with what the Egyptians was talking about, because they knew, they was on point. And of course it did match up. I mean, this is stuff that, can be proven. This is all scientific research. We know about atoms and everything. So the simple fact that they knew about this so long ago is mind boggling. And it tells us that we're dealing with a group of beings that is beyond this universe. And, we're going to get into all that. So we know when these superstorms was forming over the earth, cooling down the magma, giving us land, and eventually giving us life. The same thing matches up with the ancient Egyptian creation story, where Atum crying basically in the water, bringing about life. So they just basically substituting the sun as we know it, because remember, the sun is the reason why we got life, or the cyanobacteria. And then Atum, which is also the sun, or Atum Ra, or Ra, whatever you want to call him, is also the sun, and his tears basically brought about life. So the stories, as I said, matches up. When we go to the Mystery Schools DVD, what did we talk about in there? We basically validated everything, and we seen the conclusion that they came up with, basically saying that it's math that is the language, it governs the universe, mathematics. So when we look, we remember from the ancient Egyptian creation story, what did they put in place to govern everything? Maat. And basically, math comes from Maat. And it's a lot of people that will tell you the same thing. It's the universal law. It's math, Maat, that governs everything. There's no way around it. It don't matter. We always say with the law, if it don't add up, you're guilty. It has to add up. We always use mathematical terms when we're talking about truth and justice and righteousness. It has to add up. It has to make sense. And math always makes sense. You can't lie with math. It is what it is. 1 + 1 = 2. No matter how you slice it, it's going to equal 2. If you call it something else, that is against nature. That's against the laws of reality. So they were really heavy into this and understanding. And they knew, obviously, about math. And they knew about this whole gematria, whatever you want to call it, system. This is, it's bogus. I hate that a lot of people are just discovering this stuff now, and they're giving a lot of credit to so many people who don't deserve the credit, when all the credit goes back and should go back to the ancient Egyptians, because they already knew about this stuff. They built it, and that's the thing, Aristotle and Thales and, so many other Greek scholars, all the stuff that these people are accredited with, all the Greek scholars who did anything, Da Vinci, everything, all these people, the Egyptians built this stuff. I mean, for them, it's like, okay, you did this stuff later. The Great Pyramid basically has everything these people has ever done in it. And that's the point of it. And that's the thing that blew me away when I started really looking into it. I'm like, damn, They put the golden ratio. They put the Fibonacci sequence. They put pi. And the crazy part is you find pi in so many different places in Kemet that is crazy. I mean, the little archways that they left that the sun peered through, that's pi. And this is where they got the symbol from, actually, from a lot of the temples where the sun shine through is the symbol for pi. So, I mean, they stole so much and they get a lot of credit for stuff. And we start learning about these people in school, all these, Greek historians and stuff like that. I hate to see people jump into the teachings of Thales and Pythagoras and give them all this credit and not, acknowledge Kemet. So, that's kind of crazy. Now, remember, we have the gods that was created and everything. We got Isis, which is the god of health and marriage. We got Hathor, the goddess of love and beauty. Osiris, the god of the afterlife, the god of life and death and resurrection. We got Seth, the god of evil. Thoth, the god of wisdom. Nephthys, the protectress of the dead and mummies, goddess of lamentation. So remember, these gods was created before the earth was created, before people. So, why were gods created and given these kind of attributes before people was even created? Now we can look at these things as being the part of the dual nature. These guys represent the dual nature of reality. They represent things that exist, principles in reality that exist. So we know you can't really deal with some of these things unless, this is something around. There must be some kind of life to give us the energy of love, to give us the energy of beauty and everything like that. It's something that we would think is a human trait. It's human stuff, love and beauty and lamentations and burying the dead and life and death. If people are not alive yet to even worry about life and death, so why create these gods before that? So, they must have known that it had to be life before us. And this energy was already out there. Now, again, we can argue that these are human emotions and feelings, but we know cats and animals, dogs and stuff like that feel love. They feel fear and everything like that. They have these same kind of emotions like we do. So we got to remember that these animals was on the earth before us. So we are the last creation to be put on this planet, but animals existed before us. Dogs feel love. They feel fear. They feel when you are fearful and scared and stuff like that. Many animals do. They have emotions. We've seen it. So we can't put these things in the category of strictly human. It's not what makes us human. It's our soul, our energy. We are unique in that aspect. And it's something that a lot of people who, when you start digging into Metu and everything like that and the creation story, a lot of people looked over that. A lot of people ain't even think about it. Well, wait a minute. Why would they create these guys and give these guys these kind of, attributes before people was even created? So, this is just a hint. This time we're going to get into much later and it's deep. You got to understand, this stuff existed. It's an energy. It had to be here before us. So, we can't just, take it as human emotions. We have to really ascribe it to every living thing. And if you really want to get deep into it and break it all the way back down, we don't even know if life on the ultra small microscopic level can feel these same type of emotions. We see a bug, we step on it and we kill it. And we see a flower, we try to swat it down. We don't know, the system, the life, the reality of bugs and insects and animals. And it's something that the ancient Egyptians strive to understand, So, they looked at the dung beetle, the scarab beetle and said, whoa, look at what this beetle does. And it lays its, eggs inside the dung. It's an amazing thing. So they understood stuff and they took the energy from it and, took the attributes from it and, put them in people into their gods and say, well, you know what? This guy represents this thing. So when we think about emotions and feelings, understand, as I said, these are energies. So as I said in part 5, remember, universe came into existence 4.5 billion years ago. Universe, our solar system, I should say, 4.5 billion years ago. But before that, there existed the rest of the universe that they say exists between, 12 and 16 billion years, before we did, or, in that area somewhere. It's a long time ago. We know that. As I said, some life, something had to have come into existence besides us in this vast universe. And that's obviously true. I don't even like to even speculate that. I know 100% for sure, based upon what I just know about what's out there. Of course, there's an abundance of life that's out there. And it's obvious. And of course, these beings, whatever they are, whatever they look like, they must have the same kind of dealings as us. They must feel love, hate. It has to be a sense of good and evil. It has to exist, energy. I mean, you take it back. It's still the emotions that we feel is still an energy. You can put it in a person energetically. I mean, if you want somebody to feel an emotion, I mean, it's just an electrical shock. Remember, he was talking about in the Matrix. It's just electrical signals interpreted by the brain. Feelings and emotions, work the same way. I mean, you can energetically put love into a person. If you play music, that is still a frequency. That is still an energy. A scary movie, I mean, so many things that you can, a picture even. I mean, this is still energy. We look at it as matter, but it puts out an energy. So you may not think that, when you look at a scary movie that, the TV is putting out energy or something like that, but really, it is. And not only that, you are also creating the emotion of, fear within yourself because you're seeing this stuff. Bottom line, when you trace it, it's still an energy. So the Egyptians understood that, it's energy all around us, seen and unseen. It is basically the nature of reality. And when you look at, again, the Agdod, and the Agdod is basically telling you that these things are things that always existed. Nun and Nunet, which is the watery abyss, Ha and Hahet, the infinite and finite, Ka and Ket is the darkness and the light. Amun and Amenet is the seen and unseen, the hidden and the revealed, basically. So they understood that reality exists in all of this. You think about reality, it consists of these things, hidden things, infinite things, light and darkness. And these emotions are no different. Now, remember in part 5, we talked about DNA and us having this animal DNA. So now we know that the ancient Egyptians obviously understood this. This is why we see so much animal stuff everywhere. The whole animal heads and everything people always talk about and thinking that we worship animals and all that. We see the depiction. So when you look at the depiction of Khnum fashioning man on a potter's wheel, it's representing the fact that, they understood, of course, that we come from women, that women give birth to human beings. So seeing Khnum fashion man on a potter's wheel is saying that, our bodies is a creation. Our bodies was created. Our souls is put into the creation by Khnum. So Khnum puts the Ka into our bodies, our soul. So the reason why they have Khnum there with the ram's head is because in the ancient Egyptian language, soul and ram actually sounds the same. And we always see that depiction with Khnum fashioning a man, and you always look over and you see Haket there too. And Haket is basically creating the body of man inside the womb of the woman, the egg or what have you. And we know she is depicted as a frog. And as we also talked about in part 5, is how our insides, our muscular and skeletal systems resemble frogs. So this is why they use Haket and used her as a frog and gave her that attribute and described that to her because it's talking about our insides, and we see it resembles frogs. Now, we also talked about how we share genes with cows. And remember, Haru, when he was born in the manger, Haru was there, or Hathor was there, symbolizing the surrogate mother. And this is all metaphorically speaking and trying to tell you that we have this DNA. And, you would think, how can a cow be a surrogate mother to, something that's supposed to be like a human being? And, this is why it's just symbolic that we share these same genes. And this is what it's talking about. We know that they stole that, with Christianity, with, Jesus in the manger and everything like that. We see the cow always there. Now it's one thing to see the cow there once. You know, if you see it there once, it's like, okay. But most of the depictions that we see, we always usually see this cow. So we know this is where they're stealing it from. They're taking it from, you know, the creation story of Heru. And you can look at a lot of different pictures of the whole, you know, Jesus in the manger, and you'll see that cow there. And it's just clearly plagiarism. And we see, you know, that they taking it from the ancient Egyptian creation story of Heru. But, you know, when you look at many of the depictions of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, you always see animals in some kind of zoomorphic form and some kind of animalistic nature, something taking place that's dealing with animals, because they understood the connection that we have and that we share these genes and DNA. So now when we go back and look through history, it just seems like everything begins with the ancient Egyptians. And this is like what everybody is really into. It's the most read about subject in the world. Even there's more books printed on ancient Egypt than any other subject. That's a known fact. So many people study it, but it's not much known, you know, really about the world before that. And it seems like every time we look into stuff, it stops at Kemet. Now, obviously, it was, you know, stuff was going on before that. A lot of stuff that they obviously don't want us to know. Now, the thing is, when you look at ancient Egypt, we know it's old, it's ancient. But the thing is, we can trace the culture of Kemet, you know, back through Nile Valley and, you know, Nubia, you know, all the way into Ethiopia, into Tia in Ethiopia. And we find artifacts. They've been finding artifacts for years, dating, you know, over 15,000 years. So we're talking, that's a large gap between the dynasties and these Africans at the time. So, you know, when you go back to Ethiopia, we know about things, we know about Nut, and we know about the whole ancient Egyptian creation story. We know what hieroglyphics look like. You would expect to only find these things in, you know, maybe Nubia, but in Egypt as well. You don't expect to find them as far south as Ethiopia. And of course, you know, we do. When you go to Tia in Ethiopia, you know, they find Nut. You find in Nubia the 6,000, 7,000 year old carvings and writings, hieroglyphic looking depictions from these cultures. So it's obvious, as we always say when people talking about Kemet, that, you know, Kemet came up through the Nile Valley civilizations, you know, and ultimately landed in Kemet. The thing is, when they got to Kemet, were the pyramids there. And of course, those pyramids was already there. So we're talking about thousands of years ago, you know, that we have this whole culture, Egyptian culture. Excuse me if you hear little kids screaming in the background. There's a bunch of kids outside. But you hear, you see the culture everywhere going up Nile Valley from these Africans. And we got to remember that Africa wasn't always called Africa. Even in the Bible, they call it Ethiopia because that's what it was called. And it's supposed to be the cradle of life there, where life supposedly began, which is another weird thing because it seems like that's the furthest back we can go and find like not artifacts, but find like life, and find life doing something before ancient Kemet. And it's not a coincidence that it's the same people who basically started the dynasties. So obviously something was going on. And that's why a lot of people believe that, you know, before people lived on the surface of the earth, they lived inside the earth, because you just don't find nothing. It's not much known about the world, about Southern Africa during this time. So remember in part 1 of Metu, we was talking about the pyramids. I showed you the video when the archaeologists and the researchers was basically looking at the pyramids and examining the stones. And he said that the pyramids could very well be, you know, over 100,000 years old. So when you see that video and you see that they were finding these artifacts 20,000, 15,000 years ago, I mean, it's almost proof that the pyramids are at least 100,000 years old, you know, much older than 15, 20,000 years old, because we know, you know, that civilization, those Ethiopians, they aren't the people, they aren't the ones who built the Great Pyramids. They didn't come up the Nile Valley into Kemet and build those pyramids. The pyramids were there long before them, because you can look at, you know, just what they had through their journey up the Nile Valley and sea, they definitely didn't possess the type of knowledge it would take for you to create those pyramids. So again, those pyramids definitely was there before they made it up the Nile Valley. I mean, it took them a long time to get up through the Nile. So, you know, the more you start to study and you start looking at this stuff, it almost seems like, you know, the ancient Egyptians, I mean, these Africans survived some kind of cataclysmic event, as I always talk about, because it just took so long for them to go from Ethiopia up into Nubia. Something happened possibly twice on the planet, maybe between that time, or it just, you know, took them a long time to really start to establish civilizations up and down the Nile, you know, before they finally got to Nubia, then eventually Kemet. Now, the Egyptians understood that the body was about transformation, that every day your body goes through a transformation because of the effect of time on the body. So the scarab beetle was deified as, you know, Khepri, and they looked at the scarab beetle as being, you know, like a god because of what it did. You know, the dung beetle basically rolled this ball of dung around across, you know, the ground and all across who knows where. They rolled this ball, and the ancient Egyptians looked at it as, you know, the sun moving across, you know, the sky, and eventually, you know, causing rebirth, coming back up. And they looked at that and said, you know, the scarab beetle is, you know, it's a bad mother. The scarab beetle basically is its own creator, its own god. Because remember, the scarab beetle lays its eggs inside the dung, and they roll that dung around. And then eventually at some point, you know, life is going to come out of that dung. So they looked at it and said, yo, the scarab beetle is a god. It basically is like the sun. It makes its own being. It creates itself. It's a self-creator. So when we look at the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which I have, if you don't have this, you should definitely try to pick this up if you can. It's a book that we're going to go through. But when you look at plate 20 in Book of the Dead, so I won't read the whole thing. I'm going to go in here. It says, "Hail to you, Harakti, Khepri, the self-created. How beautiful is your shining forth from the horizon when you illuminate the two lands with your rays." And you're going to find a lot of references in the Book of the Dead to Khepri, because whenever they wanted to talk about immortality and stuff like that, they use Khepri. So again, the reason why they understand this stuff about the dung beetle is because they study existence from the very beginning, from the energetic form of existence, which is basically just energy, you know, into you know, space, and then you have energy combining and creating elements, and then eventually we get matter, and eventually we get life. I mean, they took it from, as I said, from energy up into to bacteria and insects. I mean, even when we go later, we'll start getting into like the domains. You have like mineral domains and you know, sand and stuff like that. I mean, they study everything, because you have to really think about dirt. You got to think about sand. You got to think about minerals. And we know that plants grow, you know, when you got a plant in the ground, it can survive and live, not just because of the sun, but because of the minerals and everything it draws from the earth. So that's a life sustainer. That's a life sustainer. That's an energy giver. It's the dirt itself. It's alive. It's giving life. So of course you will look into that. The same thing with crystals, and crystals is I think that's a whole video in itself that's going to be on YouTube. We're going to get into that down the road, but it's going to be video that's combined with a lot of the stuff we're going to get into down the road as well. But we're going to get into that whole, you know, the whole thing, people with crystals, why they got them all around them and everything like that. We're going to get into that, and I'm going to really explain to you the power, because it's deep.